devices that we could characterize as computers made it out into the market on a yearly basis around the world. And you can see for personal computers, PCs, there's like 240 million a year shipped. There were smartphones back then. There's about 70 million shipped a year in terms of smartphones, but they kind of looked like this. I don't know if you remember these things. They all had the like little bally thing in the middle, right? I think the BlackBerry Pearl tried to make it look like a pearl and rotate it around. Sometimes they actually acted like cursors and things like this. So this is what the state of smartphones looked like about 10 years ago. And if you trace these lines forward, here's what's happened to personal computer shipments over the past 10-ish or so years. Meh. Right? Not that impressive. Here is the mobile line, which some people point out has plateaued. Right? Like, oh, but it stopped growing. Well, if there's any place to stop growing, it's probably like 1.7 billion things shipped a year. Right? It's a pretty good place to plateau. But what we should take away from this is lots of mobile devices in the market, right? And more hitting the planet every single year. And what that leads to is lots of people doing things on mobile. Going back again 10 years, this is our friends over at Facebook and their monthly active users. Back in 2006, they had about 12 million people using the service on the desktop every month. Not that exciting. What happened over 10 years? Also not really that exciting. Until you add the mobile line and you see kind of where they sit now. So all these devices create lots of audiences that are now on these devices, right? Many devices, many people using those devices. And it's not just the existing products that benefit from this. It's also new products. So if you go back 10 years and you ask what was the fastest growing application of all time back then, in 2006, anybody have an idea?
Netscape.
Netscape? No, 2006. A little later. You know it. If I say it, you'll all know it. And oh, yeah. Skype, correct. Skype was the fastest growing application to that point. Nothing grew as fast as it because it hit 630 days, it hit 40 million users. In fact, Skype was so popular that eBay bought it, then a private equity group bought it, and then Microsoft bought it. So it got bought 3 times. Pretty good, right? Show me another startup that can say they got bought 3 times. But that's how long 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that's how long it took to hit 40 million users. Last year, we had Super Mario Run, which hit 40 million users in 4 days, just on iOS. And I cheated here. I know the line actually shouldn't even show up, but I had to kind of make it look like something. And just for kicks, let's look at this for a second. How long did it take apps to reach 10 million users? So it took Super Mario Run 1 day to hit 10 million. Anybody have an idea how long it took Pokemon Go? Obviously Pokemon Go, pretty popular, right? A few hours? Okay. 2 days. Pretty good. Not Mario good, but pretty good. What about Angry Birds Space, which is the fastest growing of all the Angry Birds games? 3 days. Google Plus? I know, you all laugh. This always happens. This always happens. This is just numbers. I'm not... 16 days for Google Plus. Which, you know, is why I think there was all hands on deck at our friends in Menlo Park at the time when that happened. Oh, shoot, I gave it away. Twitter, 780 days. What about Facebook? It's a pretty different world, right? In terms of how quickly you can reach audiences. So lots of devices, lots of audiences. Those audiences can grow really darn quickly. But is anybody making money off of this stuff? Off of these devices and all these users? Well, if you look again 10 years ago, here's how much annual mobile payment volume happened on PayPal. It was $900,000 only, less than $1 million. Fast forward 10 years, and it was $155 billion. So people making money off these things as well. And I like this chart because it sort of shows both some of the opportunity and some of the scale. So the biggest shopping day we have in the United States is called Cyber Monday. You have to say it like that, because at every talk there's some kind of marketing plant in the audience, and if you don't say it that way, they come out and tackle you. It's kind of awkward. But Cyber Monday, 10 years ago, did about 610 million in one day online sales. That's pretty good, right? More than $500 million in one day of online sales. Fast forward again 10 years later, and that number has jumped to about 7 billion in one day. A lot of growth up and to the right. You can see that line kind of accelerating. But if you look at the biggest online shopping day in China, which started around 2009, it's called Singles Day, they did 25 billion in one day. The other interesting thing about this is the amount of sales that happen on mobile in the US on Cyber Monday is about a third, whereas in China on Singles Day it's 90%. So lots of opportunity in both kind of quadrants here. Anyway, what you should take away from this is lots of devices, lots of audiences, and an opportunity to have a business in that world. But what's most interesting to me is looking at it like this. This is now going from 1985, where personal computers kind of kicked off. And you can see the growth not of how many get sold or shipped per year, but how many are active. How many are currently in use on the planet. And if you look at PCs, it's roughly like 1.3 billion or so active. If you look at smartphones, we're roughly at 3 billion right now, depending on how you measure it. But 3 billion or so active. Mobile devices, as in any kind of mobile device with a subscription, we're about 5 billion. And the amount of folks who are over 14 and technically a consumer and can buy and use some of these things is about 5.5 billion out of a population of 7.6 billion today. And so what this tells us is, A, we're dealing with a planet scale kind of phenomenon, right? We're connecting all of the folks on our rock. B, the smartphone line is basically replacing the mobile phone line. And depending, again, where you look, 2023 or so, there'll be 5 billion active smartphones. And the third thing to note is, over the last 10 years, that's pretty crazy change. Right? This is just a decade. And all of a sudden, we have high-powered supercomputers in people's pockets around the globe, connected to a real-time network of information, services, data, you name it. We often take for granted just how transformative this stuff has been. And as somebody who makes products for this stuff and has made products for this stuff for a long time, I kind of like to know, well, what have we learned? Tremendous change over these 10 years, and how have we adapted and adjusted what we do when we make software, make apps, make services. And again, to illustrate this, let's go back 10 years to that introduction to the first iPhone. This is the first camera app that shipped on an iPhone, and it effectively had two features. You could take a picture and you could look at it. And in fact, the look at it is a cheat, because I count it because there was a button there, but what it actually did is opened up another app, the gallery app, where you could look at the picture. But since there's a button, I'm going to count it. 2 buttons. Not that exciting, is it? Of course, it didn't stop there, because after iOS 2 came iOS 3, iOS 4, iOS 5, iOS 6, and iOS 7 with the introduction of flat design. You all know about flat design, right? It's basically you take something that looks three-dimensional and you kind of flatten it out. And in general, it does good things for you. Or so I'm told. So anyway, flat design. But we didn't stop at iOS 7, we did iOS 8, iOS 9, iOS 10, now the latest version is iOS 11. And if you compare what we were previously able to do with these cameras we carry around in our pockets, now not only can we take photos and view them, but we can take wild assortments of photos. And you can take portrait photos, slow motion videos, time-lapse videos, loop, bounce, and long exposure videos. There's this weird yellow button if you use an iPhone at the top that turns your pictures into like 30-second videos that you accidentally push all the time. And you're like, what the hell happened? Why is it not a picture? It's sort of a weird video. I don't know if you knew about that feature that's in there.